Welcome, LA Progressive friends and family. Dick and I are happy again, as we always are, to see Peter Laarman. And Peter Laarman is a longtime friend. It's a person that we respect and admire. He's a retired minister who formerly led Progressive Christians Uniting in Los Angeles. He's a member of the National Council of Elders. Peter serves on the National Council of Elders King and Breaking Silence team. Welcome, Peter. Thank you for joining us again this morning.
Wonderful to be with you. Really wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much.
So we just republished an article we titled Rejecting the Lost Cause Resurgence, and you'd had a longer title, As the Old White South Rises Again, Will Democrats Wilt for the Sake of National Reconciliation? And I must say, I love this article. This is my favorite article that you'd written. One thing it calls, I think a lot of us wonder, how are we in this place with Donald Trump coming back again? And not just Donald Trump, but armies of people behind him. And I like that one place you called him, or one of your people you cite called him the last Confederate general. And can you expand on what that means?
Sure. As this election campaign was going on, there was lots of reporting on the extent to which hardcore white Christian nationalists were, in effect, the backbone of the Trump vote, and we saw in the actual polling the extent to which that was true, the extent to which being a evangelical Christian, most of them are, of course, centered in the South, correlates to Trump's victory. Now, obviously, other people voted for him, but his extreme race baiting, and there's no other word for it, during the course of his campaign, using coded and sometimes, not coded language, his actual hanging out with overt white supremacists who are stars and bars kinds of lost cause people, made it pretty clear what he was proposing to do. And interestingly, again here, you have this, I call it faux populism. It's white supremacists who think that they're actually serving their own interests by supporting this guy, and fueled in part by these shameless, greedy capitalists who are also at the feeding trough, right, with Trump. And it just reminded me so much of the era after Reconstruction was prematurely abandoned, with only actually just a few years of radical Reconstruction in place, where a lot of these Northern people who had been allies of Black people seeking freedom said, well, we're done with that. We did that. It's not working. In the meantime, we need to be making money. And I think the objections I'm hearing to what I wrote are, how dare you analogize the Republican turncoats and their, complicity with the Southerners call themselves redeemers, right? The Ku Klux Klan people and the Southern politicians, Southern Democrats who took power again, they call themselves redeemers. They gave themselves that kind of thing. Well, Donald Trump, of course, calls himself "I'm your revenge," kind of the same vibe. But people have said to me, how dare you analogize Democrats who are just being reasonable, trying to find reasonable common ground with the Trump administration? How dare you compare them to the racist people who turned their backs on Black aspiration in the 1870s, 1880s? And I'm like, well, let's look at the specific consequences of collaborating or capitulating or accommodating the Republican agenda. And I cite and I lead the article by talking about this act of Congress that's whereby anybody with even the most minor offense, stealing a piece of candy, can be put in the clink. These are undocumented immigrants, no due process of law. The Democrats joined the Republicans and put that right through. And I read this in this morning's paper, They just passed another bill to deport immigrants convicted of crimes against women. Same thing. Democrats all got behind it. I don't mind if Democrats say we need to stop using resistance language. What I mind is the substantive accommodation of a Republican program. I don't see where that gets us. It only sets us back. It only enables them. Bullies aren't teased by capitulation. They just want more. We know this, right? We know how aggressors behave. Forgive me, I've said too much, but that's the gist.
So I so appreciate it, Peter, that you bring this this way of thinking into much of what you write. And it's a thread really that runs through the LA Progressive. I didn't have language for what this thread represents until I started reading the works of Hannah Arendt. And she talks about the banality of evil. And the banality of evil, and the LA Progressive has a glossary. So anybody that's watching this and who is watching this on the LA Progressive website, if you look at our menu at the top and also along the side, there's a glossary. And in the glossary, we have one of the definitions, one of the things we define among the hundreds of definitions we have is the banality of evil, a term coined by the philosopher and political thinker Hannah Arendt that describes the ways in which normal, average, not just evildoer, opportunists, narcissists, or sociopaths, they play a major role in ushering in totalitarian regimes. And that's the essence of your article. What happened with the Civil War, in my mind, the South won. From an ideological perspective, the South won the Civil War, and that's been demonstrated up until now. I mean, the mere fact that the 1965 Civil Rights Act was the first time that Black people really had the right to vote. So I so appreciate you continuing with this thread. I want to ask you if you could talk a little bit about this Laken Riley Act that was just passed. Tell us how this gloss that they put on these pieces of legislation do nothing more than give people who want to feel like they're good, give them a cloak to partner with people who are really tearing down democracy. So what is this Laken Riley Act?
It provides it provides a kind of martial law approach to people who are here without papers. It would allow local law enforcement, give them carte blanche to round people up if there's shoplifting or a speeding ticket, for God's sakes. People can be jailed, they can lose their property, they won't have legal representation. It's a whole different track. It's part and parcel of this long-term effort. And I write a little bit about this and this goes back to also to the 1880s, 1890s, to say immigrants just do not belong. They do not belong. The rules of due process, the rules of innocent until proven guilty, that's for us. That's for white people. And you realize their long-term project is, let's get rid of birthright citizenship. I mean, really just fundamentally retrogress, so to speak, to before the Reconstruction Amendments. The 14th is one of the three Reconstruction Amendments. Undo Reconstruction again. So yeah, and I've been reading here in the Times, you would need customs enforcement would need up to 800,000 new people per year to enforce the Laken Riley Act. It required huge investment of beds and detention space, about 120,000 more beds than the federal government currently has. Paying for that space, the additional labor to implement would cost immigration and customs $26 billion in the first year. I mean, now people say again, the banality of evil. A lot of these moderate Democrats say, well, that's never going to happen because they can't afford it. People never learn the lesson it will happen unless you stand up and stop it instead of voting for it. Excuse me, I'm getting a little excited here.
Should get excited. It's something worth getting excited about. We need more people getting excited.
So I think I'm every time I turn around, I hear complaints, right-wing complaints about woke and wokeism. And I think most people who hear that don't really know where it originated. It did originate with Black intellectuals, Black Lives Matters movement, and it has to do with understanding the way racism has played in our history. But anything that they don't like is woke. The thing that we're talking about is the Democrats are knocked off their feet, and they are, to save their jobs, really, to save their positions. They're saying, oh well, maybe we need to pay more attention to immigration. Immigration is a false issue. They say, well, we need to crack down on this outrageous wave of crime, when in fact the statistics are that crime is down. If they wanted to crack down on crime, they should have started in the Reagan administration, when crime really was out of control. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's just much too easy to kind of fall into lockstep, and I don't I think the Democrats, including some liberal Democrats, are running completely away from wokeism and saying, I never use that language. That's not me, and it's how to put this, it's unhelpful. We need to. I mean, I'm looking at a different New York Times thing today where Governor Whitmer of Michigan says, my job is to collaborate and find common ground. So there's that word again, used by somebody I admire, Governor Whitmer. The right, Dick, you said it better than I can say it. The Democrats were knocked off their feet, and they're kind of clueless about how to behave now, and so they're running like scared rabbits. And we can't afford that. We don't need people to pick fights over every last thing. I agree with that, but again, let me say this: it's not the abandonment of certain kinds of language that bother me. It's the substantive enabling of these policies. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. The other thing that I write about in that piece is the willingness of all kinds of people to say, yeah, let's let men be men again, right? All these tech bros who are surrounding Trump, Mark Zuckerberg of all people, trying to butch it up. Pardon the language. It's going to be quite a shit show. It's, again, pardon my language, on Monday when you see these, plutocrats who hardly need to worry about a lack of power, with their muscles bulging, and RFK Jr. with his tattoos and his testosterone treatments. This is something to pay attention to, because what it means is so-called real men once again subjugating women. And that was also part, as I say in the article, that was also part of the Redeemers thing. It's we need to be unbelievably violent and act like it, because it's part of preserving the family, and it's part of preserving, in their case, the purity of white womanhood. Well, who suffers? Who suffers when people do that swaggering thing? Obviously, women get battered and abused. Trans people and gay people get battered and abused, and people of color, most of all, get battered and abused, because who do they want to pick on most of all? Really, people of color.
So I often talk about the canary in the coal mine. I liken the Black experience, the experience of people of color in the United States. The canary was a way for coal miners to determine whether or not they needed to get the heck out of that mine, because the canaries would die, which meant that the conditions in the coal mine were bad for the coal miners, as well as it was bad for the canary. And that's why people who live on the fringe, marginalized communities in the United States are often likened to canaries when you want to measure the effectiveness of this democracy. So in your one of your paragraphs that you've entitled Plutocratic Populism, you talk about the book The Wages of Whiteness. And I bring that in when we're talking about what happens with minorities. Oftentimes, the larger majority population kind of ignores what's going on the fringes of society, or, the marginalized people, the minority people. But the fact is that book, The Wages of Whiteness, and also Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, talks about when you ignore what goes on with those people, you don't see what's coming to hit you next. So can you talk a little bit about plutocratic populism and how that is affecting everybody? It's not just Black people.
Right. Well, again, in talking about these tech bros, there are two groups, and they're interrelated, and they're mostly California and Texas-based groups of people who intend to command the heights of power in this coming era, and they are the AI people and the crypto people. And both of those things may seem like they don't affect everyday people, but obviously they will in every conceivable way. AI's job displacement potential is colossal. The potential for fraud committed against low-income people through crypto, incredible potential there. The power demands of both these technologies are such that the planet will burn even more than it's burned. Everybody else's rates will go up in areas where they're on the grid, and drawing these ginormous gigawatts of power for their mining of crypto and their storage of AI stuff. So there's that, and yeah, here's another area, I'm sorry to say, where the Democrats have kind of, tried to straddle this and say, well, maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad. No, it's going to be bad. It's going to be devastatingly bad, right? Come on. We have to have that conversation. We, the people, have to have that conversation and put our feet down. If the Democratic poobahs are clueless about where to go now, we're not, right? And we absolutely need to speak up. Now, we may not be heard right now because they're kind of, again, the Democratic Party's always been split between the part that is, in fact, wealth within our party and the people who are genuinely progressive. As far as The Wages of Whiteness, I actually don't quote that book. I mentioned the phrase that was coined by W.E.B. Du Bois in his 1935 book, and it's the reason I mentioned Du Bois is Du Bois was at that point a very serious Marxist, and yet here he says something that's contrary to Marxist doctrine, Marxist orthodoxy, which is racism is so pervasive in this country that it will obliterate people behaving in their self-interest. If they think they're upholding white solidarity, they will accept a lower wage, right? Now, of course, on the corporate side, they've played that tune forever, and said, well, you don't want you don't want a union, and you have to accept this low wage because we can hire somebody else. Who would that be to take those jobs if you don't?
That's right. Well, just like Heather McGhee in her book, one of the examples that I love is she talks about how when public pools in the South, when it became a requirement that they be desegregated, in the South, what they chose to do is rather than have these public pools anymore, they filled them up with cement. Okay, if we're going to have to swim with them, we just won't have pools. We just won't have we just won't have universal health care. We just won't have.
Well, and then a key part of it was
insane.
they disenfranchised the public schools and created private Christian schools that were all white. That was probably more important than the swimming pools. But that was, the thing about what ties in with your article, we all know the phrase MAGA. It's a nice make America great again. It's a nice catchphrase, fits nicely on a baseball cap, but it fits right in what you're saying. What MAGA really means is white men of means need to be at the top. Women need to have a subservient role. Blacks need to have a much subservient role. Immigrants need to disappear, and probably gays need to hop back in the closet. And you're right. We people who believe that's wrong, we people who actually believe equity, diversity, and inclusion is right, need to stand up and continue that. That is right. That's not the whole philosophy, but a lot of what we do is about ensuring equity and having diversity in all our items and having inclusion, and they are foursquare against that because it doesn't work for their white supremacist ideology.
Right. And
Yeah,
we have to fight this at every level. May I say, we need to use what leverage we have in our institutions. Um, the old expression, 2 steps forward, not 1 step back. Let's not, in the churches, for example, that have been committed to the Black Lives Matter movement, let's not retreat, even though some members in our churches or synagogues or whatever may say, oh, well, that's a little too woke for me. Wasn't that, 2 years ago, right? Universities are a huge arena of struggle because they're all declaring that they're institutionally neutral, that their money, their billions of dollars can't, have to be first and foremost, and they can't take any positions on stuff, and they're firing faculty, and how to put it, quietly eliminating people and programs that seem to represent wokeness. Harvard University just hired a lobbyist that has very close ties to the Harvard University just hired a lobbyist that has very close ties to Trump, right? Yeah. They're running scared because Trump said, well, I might take away some federal funding or, investigate your tax exempt status. That kind of cowardice, that kind of craven, again, capitulation absolutely ensures that they'll win. So other constituencies of these institutions, the members of the churches, the alumni of these universities need to get, I think I end my piece by saying, stay morally alive and awake. We need to, beyond this, rather than let years pass and then say, oh, jeepers, we actually do have a fascist state now, full on fascism. Where were we? I don't want to go to my grave wondering, where was I?
well, I think that's the perfect note for us to end on. None of us want to go to our grave wondering, where was I? And so I ask the LA Progressive community to please subscribe, to share, to do what you can to get this word out. We are in a crisis, and that crisis has been enabled by our politicians on both sides of the aisle, not just the Republicans. It's been enabled by those who are willing to make concessions, those who are willing to capitulate. And because of what Hannah Arendt calls the banality of evil. Peter Laarman, thank you again for joining us. And we so appreciate what you do. And we look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thank you all. And let's read our history and take it seriously, because it's not, as Faulkner said, it's not past, it's not dead, it's not even past. The lost cause is still with us, sadly.
Yep, I certainly hope everybody will read your article. To my mind, it's one of the best you've written. It really lays things out very nicely. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you kindly. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.